The Catalina Island Conservancy is at it again. We've got some new proposals with not so different results that they are looking for. They're still looking to eradicate the deer on Catalina. They just want to use foot-bound mercenaries instead of sharpshooters and helicopters. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. We've got another fight that we've been taking for the last couple of years that we see a new development in, and that is the Catalina Conservancy with their attempts to eradicate the mule deer. To walk us through that today, we have brought back our legislative director of CRPA. He's also the host of Firing Line Radio. You can find him on AM 590 The Answer every Saturday at 1 p.m. That is Rick Travis. Rick, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, before we get into this today, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. It really helps get the message out as far and wide as possible, and we need it in this case. We could potentially be saving a deer with every comment, with every like, and with every share on this. So please, let's get this information out there. We need to bring some advocacy back to this fight so that we can put an end to these plans to eradicate the mule deer on Catalina. So Rick, let's jump into this today. I've got an article and I've got a press release that I wanted to go over with you today. Jacob, if you could pull this up. This here is from CBS News. Catalina Island has proposed a plan to have professional hunters eliminate its deer population. Last year, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors unanimously rejected a Catalina Island Conservancy project to have sharpshooters fly around the island in a helicopter and kill the deer. Though most effective, we removed this method based on community feedback and shifted to ground-based professionals, Catalina Island Conservancy wrote on its website. According to the Conservancy, the invasive mule deer were brought to the island roughly 100 years ago. They claim the deer heighten fire danger by grazing on the native plant life, which allows highly flammable grass to spread through the island. This dry, fast-burning fuel leads to hotter, more frequent, and destructive fires, which in turn allow even more invasive species to take hold, the Conservancy wrote. This self-reinforcing pattern is known as a positive feedback loop, and the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to stop. The Los Angeles County Fire Department disputed the Conservancy's claim that deer increase the fire hazard but mitigate the risk by consuming vegetation, according to Supervisor Janice Hahn. Hahn, who represents Catalina Island, expressed her strong opposition to the proposal and called for the Department of Fish and Wildlife to reject the application. The Catalina Island Conservancy said they have explored every option, including recreational hunting, fencing, introducing predators, relocating, and sterilization/contraception. The organization said its staff carefully considered all of its options, but ultimately determined that professional hunting would be the best solution. So you kind of got a lot there, Rick. They gave a little bit of the backstory, but for those who have not been following along for the last year and a half or so, can you kind of tie a bow on this and let's talk about the advocacy? You know, we have what the Conservancy wants to do, but can you kind of bring us up to date? What has this battle had over the last year and a half that brings us to today?
That's an excellent question. As far as where we've been the past couple of years, Kevin, this has been a back and forth fight. We have built coalitions to stop this because a lot of people are very upset. There is a lack of actual science. I mean, we have to go back, and I'm not being condescending when I say this, but you know, science is the idea. You put forward a hypothesis, hey, this is my theory, and then you go test it. What I will tell you is this has been, hi, this is my allegation against a species of animals, and I'm going to do everything I can to find something that will remotely support that, but I'm not going to accept anything that would challenge that. That's not science. That's building a narrative. And the CIC has spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to build a narrative to hoodwink the public of California. But what the public of California has to realize is deer are threatened statewide for various reasons, most of them man-made. And yet, here's a conservancy that is literally the definition of the wolf in sheep's clothing. They're trying to look like they're this friendly little sheep that is just there for, you know, conservation, when that's the last thing they're doing. The term professional hunters is absolutely appalling. There is nothing professional about White Buffalo, the company they've hired out of Connecticut. These people are animal assassins. They have one business, killing as much of wildlife as they can under the thing of conservancy. We would call those people, you know, in a human sense, they are the worst of the worst of, a soldier of fortune. Somebody that's just going out killing people. They have no political, no no human heart whatsoever. They're basically a licensed murderer. And that's what White Buffalo is, and that's what's happening at the Catalina Conservancy. They're not trying to work with hunters. We have sent numerous people from game wardens in their off time to try to do youth hunts, everything else. And if you look, one of their assertions that they keep making is hunting's not successful. Well, you look at the hunt last year, just last year alone at Catalina, and you look at any other zone in California, the highest by a long shot success of hunters was on Catalina. If you look at the acreage and the number of deer, the highest success rate of culling down deer was on Catalina. And that was done naturally. It did not lose them money. They have yet to ever prove how they lost money because we know from people that worked on the island how much money was paid to do that. And we're literally talking damn near $1 million. And so, you know what? I'm not buying all these assertions because there's no facts to actually back them.
Yeah, so those are the assertions, and we've been fighting those assertions for over a year and a half. Yeah, you called them assassins. I thought mercenary was a good name for it too. You know, they're going from sharpshooters to ground-based mercenaries, and that's exactly what it is. It's a signed contract to go and kill things, which is exactly kind of the opposite of what the hunting community produces in a person. There's a lot of respect that comes from a hunter when it takes an animal. When somebody takes an animal, there's a lot of respect there, and it's going toward the purpose of feeding the family. That's the whole mentality behind it. So, what of the advocacy? You know, bringing it up to today. They come out with this original request for bringing sharpshooters in to eradicate the deer. What did the community do, and what has the community done versus the Conservancy to bring it up to today?
Yeah, so the community has held very effective protests. They've held them, when people arrive at either two harbors in Catalina to try to get the larger population to understand what's going on. You know, the issue, and I think this is one of those things, I've said this before in other spaces, but there are groups that, for lack of better terms, don't normally sit on the same side of the table. And I've often told legislators and others in government, look at the group out here in your audience. These people normally don't sit at the table. When they're all sitting at the table, you might want to take note because that's not normal. And the reason it's happening is because of your actions. When you look at, California Rifle Pistol Association, which we back sound hunting as we have for 150 years. When you look at groups like Cal Deer, which is one of the greatest conservation organizations, the California Bowman Hunting and Archery Association, which do incredible work in this space. And then you look at the SPCA. You normally don't consider, oh, these people are going to be locked in arms, looking at people that tend to be in more of a center left group on an island, that these people are going to be locked in arms. That's not normally who you're going to find. Yet, we've been locked in arms for over 2 years now, fighting the Conservancy from this side of the table. And I will say to the island people at great risk because the Conservancy is well known within that community, well known by the supervisor's office for finding creative ways to apply pressure to the locals. That might be losing jobs, losing permits, losing everything else. So there's a vindictiveness around there. And so people are scared, and yet this has risen to a level. And I also want to point out, you look at this, and this is so frustrating. You have major, well respected organizations like LA County Fire saying, yeah, going on record, they're full of themselves. This isn't even close to being factual. And yet that doesn't stop. And then the final thing is, this proposal that has went to Fish and Wildlife went to Bonham's office allegedly. The last I talked to Bonham's office, as did my good friend Bill Gaines, who represents the California Deer Association. We were all told they had not received anything yet, but we're pushing because there are two ways to remove the deer legally in California. One, and you've worked with me on this in other areas, Kevin, is a depredation permit. Depredation permit requires a lot of science, a lot of hard facts. The Conservancy applied for those, like I want to say over a decade ago, and were denied repeatedly because there just wasn't the science to back it. Okay. So now they're trying to under what's called a scientific collection permit. And when you pull a scientific collection permit, let me be really clear, that is to harvest a couple of animals or a couple of species, and then you have to do a science project. And then once completing the science project, you also have to take that science project and take whatever you didn't use and donate it to a laboratory or donate it to a school where further science can be done, upholding the concept in California that we value animal life and we consider animal life has to be used 100% by the hunter who takes it for food or by the scientist who takes it for scientific study. Yet they literally want to eradicate hundreds of deer. Kevin, take a wild guess. What universities are getting this? What scientific labs are getting this? Oh, zero, which violates the very intent of this permit. The fact that this permit is even being put together shows you how manipulative that the Conservancy is trying to be. This permit was never designed to preserve one piece of flora or fauna over another. And there has been no demonstrable way. This is just shooting. And the other point that the people on the island have every right to be frustrated. At the core of Dr. Denhart's argument is we're trying to take Catalina back to a pristine time. Okay, give us a date when you're trying to take that back. Because anything moving back in time means no more building on the island, because that wipes out space. No more implanting, vineyards on the island. No more doing a lot of things they've been doing. It means literally pulling stuff out, which is a rewilding effort, which has been proven not to work that well in multiple states. Yet this is what the far left wants to do. This is just manipulation of the facts. And the bottom line that the people on the island and the people in Southern California are concerned and need to be concerned about is for many youth, Catalina is the fastest way for them to go and experience the outdoors. They get on one of the Catalina flyers, and they take you out there, and an hour later, you're in a small island community and experience that. And then, as you know, Kevin, you're literally less than a hop, skip, and a jump from getting into California wildlife areas where you can see deer, bison, some other things that as a youth you would grow up in the South Bay just looking at LA County and you would never see. And if you did, it would be in a zoo where the animal's locked up. You've never seen its natural state. So this gives so much back on a social science method that is about to be wiped out. And then we're going to ask a generation from now why young adults have no appreciation for wildlife. It's because if we're quiet and let this happen, we allow the last of the wildlife in LA County to be wiped out.
Yeah, and it's tough when you're dealing with dishonesty and misinformation, especially when you have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars behind it in campaigns. We do see that obviously in other areas of politics, and it's no different here. Needless to say, though, the advocacy has been there the whole way. We really started out trying to, like you already said, Rick, build coalitions since the day that they came out with that idea to bring sharpshooters in from White Buffalo. We got people to the city council meeting there in Avalon. Guys, we sent so many opposition letters to the city of Avalon accepting this proposal from the Conservancy that they actually made a statement in their city council meeting that they were getting attacked by bots. We sent so many thousands of emails opposing this from Californians. We took it. Then the fight went from there to the Board of Supervisors, and throughout all of this, the Conservancy is also trying to eliminate the access to the public on the island as well. So there's been a lot of developments just over this deer. But Rick, I kind of also wanted to touch on this because going back 100 years ago, there were a lot more than just deer that went over there. You had the buffalo, you had the goats, you had plenty of different species of animals that were brought over there, a lot of which don't exist anymore. And I know that throughout all of this advocacy, you've talked to a lot of the island natives over there in Catalina. What are some of the stories that you have of their experiences of eradicating other animals on the island?
The vast majority of animals never swam across to the island. They were introduced by humans. And so, you have the Spanish who used the Channel Islands as a holding ground where they could bring cattle, horses, etc., sheep, goats, let them go there and not have to worry about the native population wiping them out. And then when they needed more, they could just take a boat across the channels, whether it was up further off of Santa Barbara or here at Catalina, and grab what they needed and bring it back to the mainland. So obviously, with no predators, horses and cattle and sheep and goats expanded quite quickly on the islands. Eventually, some of those were taken off, and I want to point that out too. A lot of them were rounded up and put on ships and barged off. So this lie that the Conservancy tries to put out of, oh my gosh, the animals are going to panic and they're all going to kill each other before we can get them to the other side. It's going to cause. Look, we have hundreds of years of examples of wildlife and domesticated animals being transported back and forth. In fact, the Fish and Wildlife Agency has transported animals over and transported them back over. And you know what? The LA Times, who covered that story even back in the 50s and 60s, really carefully, because there was a famous little fawn that got to be reunited with her mother because they got separated. Yeah, there was no reports of, oh, we lost half the deer or we lost 10 deer. That never shows up in the record. So, then you have to ask, well, if it's the same type of barge, the same type of everything, why is this all of a sudden different? What's the mechanism? And like everything else that they scientifically, and I'm putting air quotes again on that, purport, there's no evidence on Catalina. They'll try to take something from somewhere else in the world and go, well, there's this problem here. Well, yeah, there's a lot of causality that's never examined. The fact that, oh, if we brought them to reintroduce them into the herds here in California on the mainland, they won't. They came from those herds, and we've already redone reintroductions. And again, no science that, like, the deer in the San Bernardino Mountains went, oh, those are deer from Catalina, let's go beat them up. Nope, that never happened. They interbred. So there is so much disinformation. And, the other point is, an organization like White Buffalo, they're doing horrific things. I mean, if I sat there and said, oh, to wipe out any animal population, I'm going to use sexual attractants to lure them into an area. I'm going to do traps. I'm going to do all this other stuff. People would find that to be reprehensible. Well, these people are going to use rifles. They don't care how many rounds. Much of what's been said about white buffalo is they sometimes put 5 to 7 rounds in an animal to drop it, to put it down on the ground. We would never accept that in hunting, as you know. Hunters would lose their licenses for that kind of stuff. So again, this is not clean. This is not humane by any stretch of the imagination. And it's also taking away, I mean, this is probably the biggest set of wanton waste that is being organized by a single group, because none of that precious meat, that California resource, is going to be used for anything. It's just going to go into a dump. And this is where it comes back to what I think you're getting at. The people on the island have traumatic stresses over this, because many of the people that I've talked to lived on the island when they came for the goats. They used the same kind of company. That company came over, the company shot goats. We have stories of kids in classrooms seeing goats pulling that had lost a leg or even more of their body as they bled out screaming. Those are horrific images on two different levels. Socially, that's a horrific image for school kids, adults, anybody. No one wants to wake up in the morning and see animals, domesticated or wild, treated that way. But it's also horrific into what's being done with the animals. And I think this is one of the reasons you see the SPCA, CRPA, and others aligned, because we're all like, no, that's completely unacceptable, which is the ultimate irony. I think that's one of the things Janice Hahn, and this is another one. Janice Hahn is a fantastic LA County supervisor. The Hahn family is a political dynasty in Southern California. The Hahn family is not known for being conservative at all. And yet, Janice Hahn's office, Janice Hahn, you, Kevin, we have worked on this. That should say a lot to Chuck Bonham as the director for Fish and Wildlife up there, of like, Wow. Yeah, yeah, you guys have really stepped into it because these are people that normally don't, again, sit at the same side of the table. And yet we are because we're all like, this is so egregious. This is so over the top. This cannot happen.
Yeah, that is kind of what I was getting at. I mean, if you're only looking at your own want to eradicate the deer, it's pretty easy to overlook any other repercussions that you might incur. And I think you telling me that story that you heard from one of the locals on Catalina kind of stuck with me. It's like, holy smokes, you've got school kids that have to listen to the dying screams of goats throughout their regular life and their regular daily life. That's not a good thing. Which is why, I mean, first of all, you kind of alluded to this too. There is a code of ethics within hunting. Obviously, that wouldn't meet that, but needless to say, there have been other animals that have been taken from the island. I do want to get into the letter that Janice Hahn wrote to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, but before we do that, one final thing: can you just remind us why is it such a big deal with these deer? What's so important about these deer? This isn't a Catalina thing. This isn't a California thing. It's a national thing. Why is it that we want to advocate for these deer specifically?
So deer are an iconic species. They're a species that we look at within ecosystems because if the ecosystem is solid to support deer, then it's good for lots of different flora and fauna within that ecosystem. And obviously, California is made up of various ecosystems, and deer are a keystone species. I mean, if you look at going out on the 15 towards Vegas, there's several areas where mule deer are part of that. You go to Anza Borrego Desert, they're a part of that. You go to the forest in Northern California, they're a part of that. The island, they're a part of that. So they're a keystone species that you want to watch because they're going to tell you about the health of the ecosystem. Deer have been subjected to a horrific disease based on a prion called chronic wasting disease, and it's very hard to detect in the environment. It is in California. There's a couple of states next to us, like Nevada, where they say isn't. But the problem with that, Kevin, is it can literally be in the landscape for a decade before you can pick it up and track it. To our knowledge, it is not on Catalina Island. There's been some accusations that some people tried to introduce it. There's been no proof of that. I want to set that record straight right now because until we have proof, CRPA doesn't come out with a claim. Um, I really wanted to stress that, finding populations of mule deer or any other species of deer that have yet to be introduced to CWD may be the important thing that once we figure out how to eradicate CWD from the environment, or at least strongly mitigate it, bringing those deer populations in may be a way to strengthen the genetics and to rebuild. There's controversy on both sides of that of how that would play out. But here's the one point that I always make. If you lose those deer, you lose that option.
Yeah, so basically you've got an isolated population that, to the best of our knowledge, has not been infected with CWD. CWD is a serious thing. Like you can't be eating deer that are infected with CWD, right? And this is something that spreads very easily. So this is something that we want to protect. This is kind of central to the reason why we're pushing so hard to save these deer. Aside from the horrific things that they're doing, anyways. I mean, that kind of goes without question, also. But this is an important population that we need to continue and protect. So
I want to say something really quick just to correct something so there's no misinformation going out. Some people like the Conservancy, I haven't heard it from the Conservancy themselves, but like the Conservancy have used the CWD argument that we need to get rid of deer to protect the human population. Even the head veterinarian for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will tell you at this point, there is no science, no anything that says CWD is transmittable to humans. Humans are able to consume meat that come from deer that may have been infected. This is not mad cow disease where it can spread directly to humans. Now that could change at some point, 10, 25, 50 years down the road if we don't eradicate it. That's one of the reasons we're working so hard nationwide to eradicate CWD.
fairly put. So let's go ahead and get on to the press release that Supervisor Hahn's office put out. It reads like this. Jacob, if you could pull it up. Los Angeles County Supervisor Janice Hahn has announced her strong opposition to the Catalina Island Conservancy's new proposal to eradicate the mule deer population on Catalina Island. The Conservancy recently applied for a scientific collection permit from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife that would allow professional hunters to eliminate the deer over a 5-year period. Hahn has issued the following statement. I remain strongly opposed to the Catalina Island Conservancy's new proposal to eliminate the island's mule deer population. While I appreciate they have abandoned the idea of aerial sharpshooting, this revised plan to bring the professional hunters to systematically slaughter the deer over the next 5 years still represents a drastic and inhumane approach that ignores these values of many Catalina residents and visitors. These animals have been part of Catalina's landscape for nearly a century, and the Conservancy should be attempting every possible alternative before resorting to their eradication. Options like expanded hunting seasons, relocation, or sterilization have not been fully pursued, and I believe those deserve real investment and consideration. I will continue to advocate for solutions that protect Catalina's fragile ecosystem without abandoning our responsibility to treat these animals humanely. I urge the Conservancy to work with the state officials, local residents, and stakeholders to find a path forward that balances environmental protection with compassion. Today, Hahn sent a letter to California Department of Fish and Wildlife Director Chuck Bonham urging the department to reject any application from the Conservancy regarding this proposal. In a recent meeting with Hahn's office, the Conservancy representative says there was an urgent need to eliminate the deer because the deer pose a fire hazard. However, Los Angeles County Fire Chief Anthony Maroney, whose department has a fire station on Catalina Island, told Hahn he believes the mule deer actually help mitigate fire risks by consuming vegetation. Can we address this really quick, Rick? I mean, we've been doing this for almost 2 years. I have yet, up until now, I have yet to see an emphasis on the argument that deer pose a fire hazard to the island. It seems kind of silly. Can you put a cork in this? Why are they coming out with this? Is this like I'm going to say whatever I need to say, and I'm also going to tell you that you're in danger while I'm doing it, like the California legislature does when they say all of their anti-2A laws are for public safety, but basically saying these things just to get what you want? Why are we now seeing an emphasis on fire hazards?
Well, this is what I think this is what, I don't want to put any words into any public official, including a fire chief's mouth, but I mean, like, all right, let's play this out. California, including the Channel Islands, has similar coastal terrain. Yes, there's some unique differences in what biomatter may be there in the case of flora, but it's basically coastal desert, grasslands, etc., through much of the state. There are areas that are forested and areas that have less of that. But if you're looking along the coastline, that's pretty consistent. And we all know, the Great Fire of LA that we just went through. Every news media agency blamed deer. Oh wait, no one blamed deer for that because deer had nothing to do with that. Deer have had nothing to do with any of the fires. Deer have had nothing to do with making fire bigger in California. We have never had a climatologist blame a deer. We have never had a veterinarian blame a deer. But you know what? Why not? If you're the Conservancy, throw that out and use the far left crazy fear tactics to scare the population to go, oh, we never knew that deer started deer don't start fires. Deer do not make fires bigger. Deer have nothing to do with that. In fact, deer are very selective of what they eat. That's true, but a lot of the things the Conservancy is accusing them of eating is not true. We have walked that property. We've taken members of the legislature out to that property, and we've looked at everything outside of the cherry-picked exclosure that the Conservancy waters. We have proof of that. We have caught them watering it multiple times to make it look different from the other areas because they're trying to build a narrative that is based off of not science, but human intervention. And this is the whole issue. This is all about, are we going to work on keeping California and preserving its wildlife and taking care of it and having it here? And the other problem we have in this space is we have a predator issue here in California. The Department of Fish and Wildlife, to their credit, is working with many of the stakeholders on this, but we have more cougars than we need. I'm not here to pitch that we we need to eradicate cougars. That's not our messaging. We have an overpopulation of bears. We have an overpopulation, it's been argued, of coyotes and some of the other predator species. Our wolf population's getting pretty sizable, and we have not had this big a predator mix in California in literally probably a half a century or more. And so as a result, in the case of wolves, almost 100 years or more. So as a result, species like deer and others, prey species as they're sometimes called, are getting beat up pretty hard. This again, this herd could be the way to rebuild some of that once things balance out. But one of the things that the commission is looking at for Fish and Game, as well as the department, is there is an idea that once these populations become so big, there's a die-off, there is a reduction in those species that takes time. But then it's like, how do we replace what was lost? These deer, again, become a resource for doing that. And so this isn't just about Catalina, it's about the state and it's about what we do. And we cannot afford to isolate down to an ecosystem or to any single species and advocate for it above the rest of the state. And that's exactly what the Conservancy is doing, which is just the opposite of being a conservancy.
Right, which has been our argument since day one. That argument still holds up today. And it goes hand in hand with this letter. So let's talk about this just for a moment here. Supervisor Hahn was strongly opposed to the original proposal, which was for a permit to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife for the sharpshooting. She garnered support within the LA County supervisors. And there was a lot of advocacy by Californians on this. Ultimately, that permit was denied, as was stated in the letter. You see her pose another one here. Do you kind of anticipate the same level of support from the supervisors? And how do you see this going with the Department of Fish and Wildlife? Do you see them kind of following suit again in denying this permit?
Look, the Fish and Wildlife Department, especially at Director Bonham, is got to be sensitive. He has Chief Crowfoot, who runs the natural resources, or I should say Secretary Crowfoot, that would be his official title. We also have Governor Newsom. They're going to be sensitive to the public's position on this. And this battle right now for the deer is going to come down to the public. I mean, all the players are lined up, all the players are working together. The coalition is broad, it's becoming bigger every day. At some point, the Conservancy has to decide, are they going to continue? But they're like I'm just going to call it, they're like a spoiled child. They have been told, it's in the public record for decades. No, no, you can reduce it, you cannot eliminate it. No, no, all based on literally decades of science from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And yet, Dr. Denhart's like, no, the only thing that will work is zero deer, zero. So, it kind of reminds me of when some of my kids were growing up and their mom and I would say, no, you can't do this. And they just kept trying to hammer us to see if they could wear us down. That's where I see the Conservancy. They're like a child trying to wear down the adults in the room. And the adults are saying, there's ways to make this work. There's ways to balance this out. And I think that's why this coalition is so broad-based and so together, is because we're all looking for the same thing. There is a point that we can all come to agreement on, but it's not zero.
So I guess having said that, we've done the letter writing campaigns in the past. It's proven effective. Definitely seem to have the support. I mean, it's like the people on the island have our support, but we're all working together. So I guess, what are your final thoughts on this? Do we have any deadlines coming up? Is there a point in time that the Department of Fish and Wildlife has to make a decision? And what are the ways that we can advocate moving forward?
I think once the department says that they've received the application permit, there's probably going to be at some point a public uh, engagement. And during that engagement, I think all of our allies, all the people watching this video, they can already start. I'm sure you'll put something out like you always do, Kevin, for them to be able to send letters to Director Bonham and others. But this is an issue that we need to keep in social media. It's an issue we need to keep in the media. It's an issue that we need to keep pushing back. And We need to demand that, terms are used, like the term professional hunter. They're not professional hunters. If you want to call them wildlife mercenaries, assassins, whatever, call them what they are, but they're not professional hunters. There is nothing that the International Hunter Education Association or California's own hunter ed program would classify those people as professional hunters. They're not. I think also this is a battle that I'm hoping will wake up California to something that we've realized. It's about preserving wildlife for future generations. And I want to point the differences out between a conservancy and the hunting community in my closing statement with you today. Here's a conservancy saying eradicate an entire species of deer, and I would argue a subspecies of deer, that they should be like the mule deer of Catalina as a subspecies. Here is on the hunting side. Hunters have literally put more money, as Jerry Brown said in a bill statement, and more time on the ground rehabbing areas for things that we don't even hunt. Why? Because we understand balance in the ecosystem. There are animals that people have loved to hunt that we have said, no, you know what? The population, it's not right. It's no. And we went years, sometimes decades, not hunting anything. We will only hunt what is considered to be in excess. Hunters came out in good faith to try to help pull the deer population down, to try to find balance on the island. And that was met with, thank you for knocking some of the deer down, a little over 300. And now we're pulling your access to the island. And we're going to isolate this to like maybe 50 people on the island to be able to go hunt. Well, let's look at what they're doing. They're doing that because then any argument they can make would be like, oh, see, the deer population spiked. Well, yeah, you've removed a pressure, you've removed a point. They have asked people to do all sorts of things that are just improper. And so this really comes down to, if you're the public watching this video, do you want to be on the side of people who care that not just you, not just your kids, but your grandkids and their grandkids are going to have wildlife to look at? Or do you want to see the further erosion and eradication of one of the greatest places on the planet when it came to wildlife? This is the home of Yosemite, Sequoia, Joshua Tree, and the list goes on of national parks. This state has some of the most iconic places on the globe. Even the United Nations recognizes that. And to risk ruining that by a conservancy is just reprehensible.
Yeah. So, and there's still a lot of work to be done. So you guys keep an eye out for some of the communication that we send out through through our own efforts, as well as our friends in this battle. And to be honest, the way I see it, it's really even bigger than that. While that is a lot already, it's even bigger than that. If you are a person who likes to go and casually shoot your AR, I mean, you got to think about it this way. We are all one community. If you're not a hunter, but like I said, you like to shoot that AR casually, you got to think, if there's no animals in California, there's no hunting in California. And if there's no hunting in California, it's going to be pretty easy for the legislature, the way that it currently is, to rid you of that AR. So this should be a collective effort. It needs to be a collective effort, which is why we're here, to bring everybody together. So as you guys see that, guys, it is time to fight for this. It feels like they're on their last leg when they're arguing that the deer on the island are a fire hazard. So let's put an end to it for all time, so that this can't come back. But Rick, I do want to thank you. I know that you're a busy guy. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us today. Look forward to talking with you on this more in the future.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like this video, if you want to stay informed on this, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the videos. It really helps get the information out there, and we need it to get out there for these causes. So it's a great way for you to directly contribute to these efforts, as well as our two-way litigative and legislative efforts as well. So please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you on the next one.